She looked at me deadpan. She didn't even flinch. She said, "I'm going to stick a suppository up your ass. Call me when you feel something. I'll bring a bedpan." And I was like, "Oh, really?" She's like, "That's what's going to happen." And I'm like, and afterwards, she's like, "Then I clean you up." I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like, the most embarrassing, vulnerable thing you can imagine. And I had to do that like 2 or 3 times because I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't move. And one thing I learned in that is that you can't fight that. That's going to happen. There's nothing I can do that says you're not going to do it this way. Like I'm not going to shit in a bedpan. You're not going to clean me. No, that is exactly what's going to happen. You have no choice. So you can kick against it, or you can just like put your trust in the staff and go like, they do this every day. This is not embarrassing for them. It's embarrassing for you. This is what they do. And you can allow yourself, and then it breaks down. It gets chipped away. It gets chipped away. And when you get up the other side of it, you go, okay, that was a terrible experience, but a piece of me that was stubborn, a piece of me that was self-sufficient, a piece of me that was maybe not like humble enough, it's gone now. It's been chipped away.
Wes, thank you for joining us. Uh,
You're so welcome.
Wes, who are you? Where are you? And what do you do?
I am Wesley Gray and Reyneke. Everyone just calls me Wes. It's Reyneke. Americans cannot pronounce my surname, which is hilarious. In fact, no one can pronounce my surname because it's a weird surname. I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. I turned 45 in 2 days' time, which is fucking terrifying. I have 3 kids. We have a new puppy in the house. So if you hear me scream, Astra, no, suddenly it's because she's chewing a shoe or something. Um, I am the editor in chief of Bike EXIF, which is the world's, I mean, I know it's a bit braggy, but it's the world's leading custom motorcycle website. I'm pretty sure my contemporaries that write for the other websites will give me shit about that later. And yeah, I fell into fell into editorial journalism, whatever you want to call it. I never really planned to do this. I don't think, in fact, I don't think anything that I did in my career was stuff that existed when I was a kid, other than my first job, which was working at McDonald's, and my second job, which was selling shoes. Those 2 jobs are very traditional. Everything else I've done, it's really stuff that wasn't on the aptitude test when I was in high school. So yeah, that's me. I'm also a musician. I play in a band. I've been playing guitar since I was 16, but never really got good at it. So I suck as a guitarist. But then I took up drums, which I did get good at. And then 2 years ago, I decided to learn bass, and then ended up being a bassist in a band with friends that had asked me years ago to be their drummer. So such is life. That's pretty much it. That's me in a nutshell. I work from home. I have no office. I have a corner of the 3 bedroom house we live in, that is cordoned off by nothing more than a bookshelf and a set of noise canceling headphones. That is my office,
Hey, at least you
which
got
is
that.
yeah, which is incredibly frustrating for my wife because she'll kind of there'll be chaos in the house, and kids are trying to kill each other, and then I'll go, "What?" Yeah. And she's like, and I'm like, "Why are you yelling, babe?" She's like, "You haven't seen what's happened for the last 15 minutes." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Because I'm in my little cone of silence. But yeah, that's me basically. I spend my days trying to get good content for Bike XF. It's a lot of emailing, a lot of writing, a lot of dealing with for those that aren't in the motorcycle industry, if you're not aware, Bike XF, our focus is custom motorcycles. It's a I don't know, online magazine, blog, whatever you want to call it. It's a content website, editorial website. Our focus is custom motorcycles, and so I've made a lot of friends over the years with people that are all over the world. Um, had a great opportunity to travel a lot until COVID killed that, and it's never sort of come back since. And we feature content from all over the world. So I'm constantly dealing with multiple time zones. I have terrible routines. I probably drink too much whiskey and coffee and make poor decisions, even though my body tells me not to. So very slow learner. I think if
Hey,
there's
at
one
least
thing
you're
that
honest about it.
I think if there's one thing that's marked, that's a trademark of my life, it's that I'm a very slow learner.
Well, you seem to have made a career out of, aside from your bureaucratic complaints there, you seem to have made a career out of doing cool shit that your teenage self probably would have enjoyed doing. So there's some victory in that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of it's been challenging because a lot of it's taken me long to realize what I really enjoy doing. So, I mean, I've been writing for Bike Expo for about a decade. And in the beginning, it was just a little couple of articles here and there for Chris Hunter, who was the founder of the site and the editor at the time. So I'd write an article a week, an article every couple of weeks, and he'd pay me a few dollars, and we had a little arrangement going. And then I eventually became a sort of permanent contributing editor, and I eventually became a senior editor. And then the site sort of changed hands a couple of times, was bought and sold a couple of times, and I sort of got pushed up into editor in chief position. Um, and I kind of never really planned that. And I think at the beginning, 10 years ago when I was in my mid 30s, if you told me, well, I was a guy that loved motorcycles. I loved custom motorcycles, hence the interest in and the connection with bike. So if you told me then that I'd be kind of at the helm of it in 10 years' time, I would have been like, nah, because at the time I was a freelance web designer. I'd come out of a company that I'd been at for about, I think, somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I can't quite remember how long I'd been there. I was creative director there for one of South Africa's sort of very prominent new media design company back when Flash was around, back when
Mm.
Macromedia existed. Um,
I don't know if to say the good old days or the bad old days, but they were the days.
and I mean, like, if the gray didn't give it away, mentioning Macromedia would have given away my age.
For the massive number of people who have no clue what is being discussed
Yeah.
right now, don't bother learning it.
Uh-uh.
It's a complete
It's
waste of your time to even
yeah.
think about. Just
Yeah.
pretend it's something with
Ancient
computers.
history, water under the bridge. So I was a creative director at this company. I started there as a junior designer and kind of worked my way up. Worked on some really awesome accounts. Just got tired of being like never at home. I mean, agency life. I mean, we had weekends where it would be Friday night would be, babe, just put dinner in the microwave. I'll eat when I get home. It'd be, babe, don't wait up. It'll be Saturday morning saying, babe, I'm coming home for a shower quick, and then back at the office. And then Monday morning, we kind of push the project live, and I go home, catch a nap, and come back to work again. We had a couple of weekends like that, and it was quite funny because a friend of ours started saying that she was taking it personally because every time she came down, she lives in another part of the country, and if she came to visit Cape Town, she'd come stay over by us. And every time she did, I'd be working the whole weekend, and she'd be like, "Do you don't want to hang out with me, or like what's?" And I told my wife, like, when we get pregnant, because we wanted to have kids, like, when we get pregnant, I'm quitting. Like, that's like, I looked at my boss and he never saw his kids. And I was like, if your boss never sees his kids, that's the expectation. Like, that's the culture of the company. The guy at the helm dictates the culture of the company. And I was like, I'm not doing this. And I kind of quit. Took a pretty big client with me on retainer, which was quite nice, and managed to do it all above board. So it was like this sort of golden opportunity. They couldn't service the client without me. They didn't want to service the client without me, and the client didn't want to work with them. They wanted to work with me. And it was sort of like, you don't often get to do that, but it was a very contractual, like, we signed documents saying you may leave and take this client. So it was a beautiful like platform to springboard my own thing. And I freelanced for a while. And I kind of hit this point where you freelance web guy and a very weird skill set. Like, I could code action script stuff in Flash, and I could design really well. And I could do basic JavaScript and HTML, but the industry was moving to very WordPress based stuff. A lot of PHP development was a hot skill. jQuery was taking off. All that sort of JavaScripty PHP stuff was like the hot ticket. And I was too busy like maintaining my clients to really upskill, and I didn't have a desire to. And so I hit a point where I had a pretty big client tell me, like, we want you to redesign our website and we'll put you on retainer that's big enough to hire a couple of developers and start a company. And I went like, well, that's cool, because that's what I need. Like, I can't. I'm happy to be a project manager. I'm happy to sit at the top of this thing, but I can't do everything. And I sat down with a friend of mine who had a pretty successful coding company at the time. And we went out to lunch together, and he looked at me and he said, "What's up?" And I said, "I'm thinking of starting a company." And he said, "Don't." I was like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Dude, I pay salaries and then I don't sleep for the rest of the month until there's enough money in the account to pay salaries again. And then I get a few nights rest until the end of the month, and then I pay the salaries again, and then it starts again." He's like, "If you want a lifetime of unhappiness, hire people." And I was like, well, that's a dumb idea. Then I'm not going to do that. And around about that time, I started enjoying writing. I have no formal training in journalism, which is ironic because My wife is very educated. She has a master's degree in languages and linguistics, and she wanted to be a journalist originally. She did film studies, she did journalistic studies. So I did none of that, and I'm now, she's teaching at university, and I'm editorial full time. But it just kind of worked out. It was serendipitous. The sort of web work started drying up as the writing sort of picked up, and at some point I could just go, well, I don't really want to do this anymore, and I could just focus on writing and a little bit of photography here and there, and that's basically what I've been doing for the last. I don't know how long I don't know how long it's just been writing, but I do know that my first article for Bike EXIF was about 10 years ago. And it
So,
hasn't just been biking. So if I did some writing for some local magazines, local websites here in South Africa. I wrote for a mountain biking magazine about 50 kilograms ago before I put on all this weight, and I actually used to ride my bicycle. So yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's been quite interesting.
tell us a
Sorry,
bit.
that was probably a longer answer than you were hoping for.
That's okay. We don't. We're just hoping for answers. So silence is the worst
Okay,
possible
good.
thing that can happen in this situation.
Yeah, I wish you mentioned running a business and like your friend that kept you from doing that because of the salaries. Like, man, I wish I would have had a friend that said that to me 13 years ago.
It's probably some of the best advice I've ever had, because I think had I known myself and had I gone down the road, it would have been a total disaster. Like I wouldn't have been happy. So
Yeah.
I appreciate him. He's a good friend.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to have those that just, speak truth when you need to hear it.
Tell us about motorcycle culture. How were you introduced? What does it mean to you? What's it mean to the place where you live?
Well, I think quite interestingly, motorcycle culture is almost 100% responsible for the career I have now, because it's motorcycling that got me into the idea of writing about motorcycling. I had no, I didn't come into sort of editorial with a desire to write about things. I came into it with a desire to write about motorcycles. And so what had happened was I got into bikes pretty late, which is ironic because my dad was a avid motorcyclist. We lived in a tiny little town in the desert called Oranje, which is in Namibia. It's on the border of Namibia and South Africa. It's a diamond mining town. I grew up on small diamond mining towns. So we went from, I lived in two different small towns before moving to Cape Town. And in Oranje, there is absolutely nothing to do. Like the town is very closed off. The town, up until a few years ago, the town was owned by De Beers Mines. It didn't have a local municipality. It's only in recent years that they gave the town back to the Namibian government, and actually, it was completely locked down. You couldn't get in or out without clearance because it's an alluvial diamond mine, and smuggling is such a problem. So there was very strict controls, and as a result, and as is the culture of the company, like De Beers, it has a lot of mines in small towns where everyone that lives in the town kind of works for the same company. They made sure there was a lot to do. And we had a BMX track. We had a very cool, like big swimming pool. We had a cinema. We had exactly two restaurants. One was like a family restaurant, and the other was like a slightly fancier restaurant that you would take your wife on your anniversary. Like it was that kind of town. We had like a general store that would sell anything from a bicycle to groceries. So and one of the things we had was like a really healthy off-road motorcycle culture. There was a motocross track and an enduro track, and they would go racing in the desert, and they would go. And my dad had this Honda XR 500R Pro Link. It was the 13th one to be imported into South Africa, because at the time Namibia was Southwest Africa. It was part of South African government. And he wanted one in the first crate, and the Honda dealer said, "Sorry, they're all sold. There's 12 in the crate." He goes, "Well, I want the first one out of the second crate." Like I still have the pamphlets. And he was so
Nice.
excited about this thing. And when I turned two, he was like, "I have to do the responsible thing and stop riding motorcycles." And I kind of resented him for that for a while, because I was like, why? Like, he could have passed this on to me. Like, this would have been rad to grow up like this. But he, like, to his credit, like he wanted to man up, and he wanted to sort of like, he didn't want to be out in the desert and like fall off his bike and hurt himself. And he's got kids at home, right? And then I kind of grew up remembering those days, and always having an interest in bikes. And then when I was in my late 20s, I decided it was time to get back into it. I sold the car that I had at the time. My wife and I had two cars between us, and I sold my car to buy a Vespa scooter, which I used to commute every single day. So I go back and forth on the highway with it. It topped out at like 90 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that is in miles. I don't know why you guys don't use it. Let me just break it down for you. The metric system is really simple. It's in tens.
I feel
You
like we're
just
really going to
add
stay on topic
zeros.
here.
You just add zeros. Anyway, and I used to commute on it every day, and it I ended up blowing its engine, and at that point I was like, I think I should get an actual bike, and then I kind of got into motorcycles, and I got into motorcycles directly into the sort of adventure riding sphere of it. Um, like all sort of 20 somethings that want to be like Marlboro men, I kind of watched Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman's Long Way Round, and I was like, oh my gosh, adventure motorcycling is so rad. I have to get an adventure bike. My wife was like, oh, you totally should get an adventure bike. That's you. Like, you should do this. And I got an adventure bike, and I kind of took it on some really cool adventures. I went up through the country. I don't know if you know Lesotho. It's a tiny landlocked state within South Africa. It's very mountainous. It's a fantastic adventure riding destination. I went through Lesotho, got lost in the mountains, slept in a hut with shepherds. Like, I just had this amazing motorcycle adventure. And as most activities, 10, 15 years ago, there are forums, or that was the age of forums. Forums were everywhere, and I was part of this adventure riding forum, and I thought to myself, I want to write a story about this adventure that I've done, because that was the done thing. If you're gonna ride it, if you're gonna go on a ride, share it with your friends. So I wrote the story, and a lot of people were saying to me, it's a really great story, like you should write more. Which is sounds really cliched, but I think the kicker for me was when my dad said to me, I don't want to go on the forum, print the whole thing out, give it to me. And the next day he said to me, I couldn't sleep last night until I finished reading it. And my dad doesn't sort of give out compliments easily. So and he's a big reader. So, for him, that's kind of a stamp of approval of quality, is when he is reading something and he's kind of stuck into it. And at that point, like, forums were a thing, blogs were a thing. And I had the sort of freelance web thing going. And I just thought, well, I really like bikes, and I really like the idea of talking about them, and I like the idea of getting free shit when I have to review stuff. So I'll start a motorcycling blog, which I did. And then somewhere along the line, my interest shifted from adventure motorcycles to sort of custom motorcycles, and that sort of cafe racer scene that was taking off. And it just collided with Bike EXIF and, like I said, one or two other outlets, and I just kind of started making that transition. So for me, motorcycling is very much responsible for where I've ended up now. But it's also just a great part of my life. We still only have one car and a bike. We had two cars for a while. We have one car and two. I have a scooter and a motorcycle. So the scooter is the runaround. I pick up my 7-year-old from school on it. When it's my turn to do the driving, because we only have one car. We desperately need another one, but that's another story. And I kind of I have a triumph that for me is I want to go further, I want to go faster, and I just want to, like, have some time, to, and it's a decompression thing. I don't get to ride as much as I want to. Um, I I mean, motorcycles to me, that there have been many things. They have been a pathway to me a career. They've also been a great social tool for me. I've sort of moved in and out of various riding. I've never really joined a club or anything like that. I'm not a kind of club kind of guy. I guess that old cliche of, like, I don't want to belong to any club that would have me as a member kind of thing. But I'm sort of a very introverted extrovert. I love people, but often when I go riding, I just want to be by myself, and I want to ride at my pace and go take the roads I want to take. I mean, the riding in Cape Town is phenomenal. The roads here are incredible. The scenery is unparalleled. The amount of great places to stop with good food, good coffee. Like, it's a wonderful experience to ride here. Um, it's kind of funny because my wife and I often have that sort of, shouldn't we move somewhere else in the world? And I'm like, California or south of Spain? She's like, that's two very specific choices. I'm like, that's the only places that have better riding than Cape Town. Like,
Nice.
I'm not, I'm not gonna go live in Amsterdam. It's like, great city, flat. you know, like maybe Bavaria, but in winter it snows. So it's like South of Spain or California, year-round sun, brilliant roads. So kind of probably why I'm still stuck in Cape Town is because I can't leave the people, the food, the scenery, and the motorcycling. It's yeah.
Is bike culture big then in Cape Town, or is it
Yeah, it's
exclusive,
pretty.
or
No, it's pretty big. It's pretty common. Funnily enough, we have obviously, South Africa being South Africa, we have a huge adventure riding scene. So the sort of dual sport adventure riding scene is massive. Sort of big BMW adventure bikes are everywhere. And most of what you can get overseas we get here. We have most brands are available here like they are anywhere else. The Harley scene is pretty big too, the sort of old man chopper not chopper scene, but the sort of old man cruiser scene. Like my dad got back into motorcycling after I got into motorcycling, so him and my mom have 3 Harleys between the two of them, and they go riding together and I go riding with them sometimes. So the Harley scene's pretty big, but motorcycling in Cape Town is pretty healthy. Like the industry's suffering, the global motorcycle industry is suffering, and I think our economy is suffering like the rest of the world. So the industry side of it is suffering, but the actual people riding side is pretty healthy. You know, people are just buying older and cheaper bikes because new bikes are just prohibitively expensive. It's just insane. And funnily enough, the biggest selling bikes in South Africa are tiny delivery bikes because our sort of delivery bike, like our um like the backbone of our economy right now is delivery bikes. Like Uber Eats, we have a Uber Eats competitor called Mr. Delivery. We have at least one, two, maybe 3 major supermarket chains that have 60-minute guaranteed deliveries via motorcycle. So like the sound of the suburbs is tiny 150cc motorbikes. You hear them go up and down the street all day long. And those are the biggest selling bikes right now. So these cheap, economical, like delivery bikes. So it's a weird time for the industry.
So on the one hand, it's this sort of ubiquitous tool that's just everywhere, but on the other hand, it's just a part of the culture that your identity is so strongly tied to your choice of motorcycle. Having had friends and professional contacts at this point who have been into it, it's just so. I've never been around motorcycle people who did not have a derogatory opinion of other motorcycle people who rode a different type of motorcycle than them, even if they were very polite about it, very, very nice people. Even if they wouldn't really say it out loud in front of anybody else, they always had it. It's
Yeah,
like it doesn't matter. They ride Harleys. They laugh at people who ride Indians. If they ride BMW, they look down on people who ride Harleys. Whatever. It's like
totally.
it's always there, and it's really funny. It brings people together and it pulls them apart at the same time.
Yeah. It's kind of the same, yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same, yeah. Funnily enough, though, I've kind of got out of that mindset. I went through a phase sort of early on in enjoying motorcycles where I was just, motorcycling was my identity. Like I'm an adventure motorcyclist. I'm like a biker. And then I just like that just all got stripped away from me, and I got to a point where I'm just a guy that really loves motorcycles. It's part of what I do for a living. It's part of who I am, but I love other things as well. I love music. Um, I'm actually more likely to buy another bass or another guitar than I am to buy a part for my motorcycle. Like that's where my
That
wife
sounds
has
like a
to
lot of
like,
progress for most people I know who
yeah.
own motorcycles.
Like that. That's my wife. That's where my wife worries about me spending our money is like, it's like I see a bass on Facebook Marketplace and I'm like, that's damn cheap. She's like, you have 2 basses. You don't need a third. I'm like, I don't need this kind of negativity in my life. It's like, it's yeah. So like, but yeah. So for me, I kind of went through this thing of just I think because of what you're saying of people being so like, oh, yeah, I'm a Harley rider, and so like you got, you BMW riders, like whatever. I kind of just kicked back against that and just went like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be like in my 50s and I'm kicking tires and going like, yo, what kind of mileage you get? Like I don't want to be that dude. I just want to be like me. And I just happen to have a motorcycle in the garage and it happens to bring me a lot of joy. And I think that idea of something not taking over your whole identity. I mean, if there's one thing the coronavirus pandemic taught me, and probably a lot of people, it's like stop tying your identity into things because it can change. And if you got nothing of yourself left because that thing's been taken away, you're gonna fall apart. I mean, COVID almost killed me twice. Once when I actually got corona and I thought I was going to end up in the hospital because it was really bad. And luckily I managed to dodge going to hospital, but I got it pretty bad. And another where I just had no idea where my life was going. Like everything I knew was gone. It's like I think in 2018, 2019, I traveled like internationally in 2019 8 times, went overseas in one year. Whereas from 2015 to then, I'd been traveling regularly, but no more than 4 times a year. And suddenly I was just going to all these events, going to all these things and meeting all these people and getting to a point where you're kind of like getting on a plane, coming home and like not unpacking your toiletry bag because you know it's going to go right back in your suitcase in
Yeah.
like 2 weeks time, you know.
Yeah.
And I was enjoying it. It was tiring, but I was enjoying it. And then Corona happened, and it's like, you're not that guy anymore. You're not the editor of Bike EXIF that goes to all the events. You're just the editor of Bike EXIF that sits in your little house, you know, with your shitty little lockdown, not allowed to go anywhere, sitting at your desk, hacking away on your MacBook. That's all you are now. And it's like, I realized I put a lot of my identity in like being on Instagram, going, look where I am, look where I am, look where I am, look where I am. You know, that was me. It was like, I'm traveling. Everyone's like, where are you going next, dude? And it's like, oh, it's such a buzz. It's like that dopamine hit of like, everyone wants to know where I'm going. It's like, where are you going? Nowhere, absolutely nowhere. Like everyone else in the world, I'm going absolutely nowhere. Who am I? What's going on? And funnily enough, I didn't realize how bad I struggled with anxiety and depression until COVID happened. And every trigger I had was just being pushed so hard. And that's the second way I mean, that's the second way it nearly killed me, because my whole life I'd actually struggled with these things, never been able to identify them. And suddenly during COVID, I'm planning my own death. I'm working out down to the detail how I'm going to kill myself, because the whole bottom's been ripped out of my world. And to me, it's just the end of everything. And so, like, I'm not saying motorcycling will do that to someone. I'm saying that when you make your identity so much in the things that you do or the things that you achieve, and you forget to just be who you are, just be someone, and also lose sight of the things you have around you. It's like, you know, like, I'm not Wes, the guy that travels. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Like, these are things that are going to go on way beyond like my lifetime. Like my kids, what I put into their life has way more eternal value than how many times I've been to the States or to Europe or whatever. Like it's but I've put myself there, and to the point that when that got shaken up, I couldn't deal with it. Like, I can't go ride my bike, I can't travel, I can't, and I just couldn't deal with it. And I was like, well, what is the point then? And that was crazy for me. That was like, how am I here suddenly? Like, I know I've kind of been depressed. I know I've been anxious at times, but how am I suddenly at this point where I'm like lying in bed having suicidal thoughts, going, what is the point? You know? And I kind of came out of the pandemic going like, don't do that again. Don't get yourself so obsessed about what it is you do for a living, how it is you like. If this all goes away tomorrow, you have to be okay with it, you know. And like, I'm not saying that that's the secret to like fixing mental health. Like, I've, you know, credit to my wife at that point in time, she looked at me, she said, you need to go speak to someone, you need to go see a doctor and go like, this is where I'm at. And I did. And the doctor was like, you've got clinical anxiety, you need to get on medication. And I did, and everything was like great. And the only reason I'm so candid about this is because I think people don't talk about this enough. Like, it blew my mind when I spoke to one of my best friends and I told him what I just told you guys. And I told him, and he was like, well, how bad was it? And I was like, dude, I knew exactly how I was going to do it, and I knew exactly where I was going to do it. And he said to me, I'll do you one better. I went to the store and I bought the rope, and then I decided not to do it. And I was like, how were you there? And I didn't know. Like, how were you that close to taking your own life? And I'm your best friend, and I had no idea. And so, sorry, I've taken this down a really deep, dark path. But like, it's for me, it's like, we need to talk about this stuff. We need to talk about like how dangerous it is to get our minds locked onto things that aren't healthy for us, and how dangerous it is to think that we can do this without needing each other. I mean, your email about like the subject of the podcast hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, you are not enough. It's so counter, if you look at it on the surface level, to what you guys put out daily. You know, it's like, did you misspell that? Did you like, was this supposed to say you are enough? Like, my kids asked me at dinner before the podcast, like, what's it about? And I'm like, I told them the subject. They're like, how do you feel about that? Like, it's like, you are not enough. It's like, slap right out the gate. But that's what it is. And for me, like, when I read that, my mind immediately went to this idea of mental health and this idea of going, we're taking on so much on a day-to-day basis. But what we're not doing is saying to each other, this is what I struggle with. Like, this is where I'm not enough. This is what I'm not good at. This is what I need. Like, I mean, I have three friends dealing with teenage daughters that have attempted suicide more than once. And that blows my mind, because if I'm in my 40s and I'm struggling to deal with it, how much more is a 16, 17-year-old girl with all the pressure of social media, with all the pressure of everything else. How much harder is that? Like, we need to change this thing. And that thing of the motorcycle industry of people being, what we spoke about earlier about politics and everything, is people are just getting so wrapped up in the stuff that's just going to fade away tomorrow. It's not going to be there anymore. And so they're building their identities, they're building everything on. I mean, we could talk about social media for hours because it's just, what more can we say? Like, we've got all the science, we've got all the experiential, like, anecdotal evidence to prove that how bad it can be for people, and yet we still like, oh, scroll, 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 because it's like, oh, I feel so good, I feel so good, and then late at night I'm like, well, my life has no meaning. Why do I feel this way? I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
Well,
it's kind of
like
obvious.
you're saying, it's all built on sand. It's like, how much do we really prioritize, the image on social media and what have you? And if you just think back over the last 15 years of major social media companies that have come and gone, and, to go back to dating ourselves, like MySpace, it's, if you think about it in the context now of like, if MySpace were as big then as some of the social media is now, and it's gone, like, you put all this stock into like, oh, I've got this many followers, or like you're talking about people, people asking like where you're going, and like that whole component is that's it's gone. And so then you have to say, well, like, when Twitter goes away, or X, or Facebook, or Instagram, or TikTok, like when those fade out and they're not cool and popular and the app that everybody's using, like what happens to your identity? Was your entire identity built on that false image that sits there versus reality itself?
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? I mean, that's really what the pandemic did to me. Is that, I mean, if you go look at my Instagram account, I hardly post anything these days. I mainly throw things onto stories every day, every other day, random frivolous stuff. I just treat it. I've learned to treat it for what it is. It's just a place to share stuff. I hardly make actual posts because I realized that, you guys, your Instagram account is integral to your business. You have to post. Like, it is what part of what your business is based on. It's a building block of your business. And that's okay because there's a lot of people for who that's true. When I open the Bike EXIF Instagram account, which is one of my responsibilities, is to post the content that we post onto the website to Instagram. That's part of the business. I'm scrolling, I'm looking for new bikes to feature, I'm looking for builders, custom bike builders to make contact with. I'm answering DMs, I'm making sure the content we post is good, and I'm looking at trends so that I know what's going to perform, what's not going to perform, because it's part of the business. I realized that my personal Instagram account doesn't mean shit. It doesn't get me any business. The real work is being done offline. The real work is being done offline. And I realized that when I looked at some of the best photographers in the world, and they had like hardly any followers on Instagram. Like, there's some really good photographers with big followings. I'm not discrediting that. Like, there's some guys that have like really become big on social media, but some of the guys doing some of the best and highest paying work have hardly got a social media presence because they're too busy being out there doing real work. And when Corona hit and I had no content for my social media, that's when I realized that I'd put too much credence into it. Like, still getting paid, still writing articles for Bike EXIF, can't put anything on social media. This doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And when I post these days, it's because I see a photo, I think that's cool. Like, I went out with my friend, we shot some photos for some gear reviews. That's a cool shot. I want to put that on Instagram. And I throw up a half-assed caption with like one hashtag and I carry on living my life because I don't want to. And then I still find myself going, who liked this? Who liked this? And I'm like, stop it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter because it's such a temporary dopamine hit, right? Like, as human beings, we're so good at knowing what's bad for us and not giving a shit. I'm like the best at that. Like, my wife gets so frustrated because she's a super pragmatic person. And she'll say to me, like, I think about 3 times in the last week, maybe 4 times, I've said to her, man, I'm drinking too much coffee. It's fucking my stomach up. Like clockwork. Like, I can have 2 cups in the morning, and if I have one in the afternoon, my stomach is a mess. I'm a mess. Like, it just messes my system up. And she looks at me and she's like, so why are you doing it? And I'm like, I don't know. I like coffee. And the next day I'll be like, oh, she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I had an extra cup of coffee. She's like, we spoke about this yesterday. And I'm like, I know, but and I keep doing it. Like today, I have a friend who kind of pops around on a Wednesday afternoon, we have a bit of a hang, a bit of a coffee, and I'm like, hey man, he's a huge coffee drinker. I'm making him a coffee. I made the coffee knowing it was gonna fuck me up. I made the coffee going, this is gonna suck half an hour from now. This is gonna be so bad. And I was like, but it's coffee, you know? And it's the same with social media. It's like, don't put your and you post and you're like, who's liked it? Who viewed my story? Who viewed my story? And I'm like, I know it's bad for me, you know?
Well,
Um,
like caffeine, it's addicting. So there's
yeah,
the answer to all of
there's
those
that,
things at
right?
once. And also,
Exactly.
I'll throw out there that if I were your wife, which we're both glad that I'm not, the whole with the beards, it'd be like Velcro. It wouldn't work out at
Speak for
all.
yourself.
All right. Well, thank you. So if I were your wife, what I would have said, I wouldn't have said, why do you do it? Because it's obvious why you do it. I would say, why are you complaining about it? Because
Well,
what do you
that
want?
is that. Yeah,
You want
yeah.
her to like
I
follow
get
you
that a
around
lot.
and like
Yeah,
slap the coffee out of your hand in the afternoon?
yeah,
You're the one who's gonna have to put the coffee down.
yeah. I get that a lot. I get that a lot. She's very long suffering, my wife. She's very patient.
Well, God bless her. And if
She's been
she's
married to me for like 22 years, so she deserves
wow.
a medal by now. Yeah, it's been a long run.
Have you told her thank you today?
I tell her thank you every day.
All right, that's
In
good.
fact, I think the number one phrase I say to her is like, "Why are you even with me?" She just looks at me and goes, "She looks at me and goes, I don't actually know."
Well, at this point, there's no turning back. Oh no, you're frozen.
Something. I mean, it's. Oh, you guys freeze? Did I freeze?
Yeah. Okay,
You
you're back.
back? Oh, yeah, we're
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
So
Yes, I think. I
Wes
mean,
loves
it's
his wife. That's what
yeah.
was being said
Just
while we couldn't
just
hear.
had to put that in there. It was on the list of things I had to say.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, Wes, first of all, I want to commend you for your willingness to be open about a very difficult subject. And as much as social media is filled with mental health awareness, it's still a taboo subject in interpersonal communication. And I think that I think it's a universal psychological phenomenon that we're uncomfortable with the subject because we I don't want to look into the darkness within you because the darkness is within me too, and I cope with life by not looking into my own darkness. I think that's the
Yeah.
mindset that people experience, and it's not unlike a contagious disease. We don't want to expose ourselves to something to which we know we are susceptible to. And so it's far and I mean there's entire sections of like dystopian classic fiction that touch upon the subjects that we're discussing today, in that the bulk of humanity will is so determined and so desirous of keeping their back towards the darkness within them that they have to create an artificial light in front of them that occupies their eyes at all times. And that takes a lot of form. We're talking a lot about social media, but it's something that takes our attention. It requires no real work. Might take you work to build your content or whatever, but the act of engaging with social media requires no real effort. Therefore, it will produce no real reward. However, it's something to direct your consciousness towards that
Yep.
yourself, isn't difficult stuff, isn't meaningful stuff, that is really the fiber of life that we must be working on, we must be strengthening, and that's where the dishealth comes from. And I don't know how to untangle it. It comes up in every single podcast we have at this point because it's such a massive subject of our society.
Yeah, it's so prevalent, and I think you guys okay there for, oh yeah, sorry. I think our internet just had to switch over to we because I'm in South Africa, we have power cuts, which is so much fun. So we have I explain this to people from other parts of the world and they look at me like I'm crazy, but our power goes off about 2 or 3 times a day because our national grid can't cope with the demand, so they schedule power cuts for us. And so when they do, like my UPS has to kick in and my internet tends to freeze for a second. So I think that's why we had a few
Well,
freezies.
hey, the transition to California will be seamless for you then. You should head over immediately. You'll love it.
Yeah, so I love what you said about I love that you said that social media is so full of awareness, because I had that exact same thought today, thinking about, what could we possibly speak about today? And I thought, why is it that like we seem to live in this very enlightened age, but we're really not that enlightened? If you looked at social media, if you were an alien, you came down, you looked at our social media, you'd go, these humans are so good at talking about mental health, but we're really not. We're really bad at it, actually. Um, and I don't know why that is. Sorry, did I lose you guys again?
No, we're here.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't know why that is because it's look, it's hard for me to break down because I'm a man and that's my lived experience. I'm a guy, and guys struggle to talk about this stuff. My wife has a group of friends that go out together regularly and will just get right into the depth of their lives and their struggles, and they'll cry it out, they'll talk it out, and it's so beautiful because she'll come home and she's just got such deep connection. And I look at the guys and that I'm friends with, and we speak about deep stuff, but it's not that deep. And it's such a cliche, but it's just is what it is. Like guys are just, we want to be stoic, we want to be like strong. It's like I don't need help, I don't want to talk about this stuff. And like my theory is the only way I can break it down, bringing it back to like what can you do for yourself, for the people around you, is I just talk about it every opportunity I can. I almost like wedge it into conversations if I can, because I just want people to go like, I struggle with my mental health, and then do you as well, and then we can talk about it. And I have a friend who legitimately had a burnout crash, and I don't want to say lucky, but you know an aspect of my mental health struggle has been easy to deal with, and that is that I have a good doctor that got me onto good medication that didn't have a massive effect on my life. Um, I didn't have to experiment with various medications, up dosages, down dosages. We got in on a good medication, went up slightly, found a happy medium, and you know, it hasn't fixed everything, but it's been a great baseline to work from. My friend on the other end had a proper crash, a proper breakdown, a proper burnout that he was out of action and had to be on various medications that he had to go up and down, and then wasn't told that he needed to scale it back, and then took too little of it, and then had another crash and had a completely like panicked episode, and had all these things that he went through that were just nightmarish because finding that baseline wasn't as easy as it was for me. His thing he was struggling with was so much bigger. And for me, like being able to speak to him and we can actually have very tangible conversations about things that are very real. And again, it's a total cliche, but we say a lot, well, mental health should be like physical health. Like if I hurt myself and I like sort of sprain my ankle and you sprain your ankle, then I can say, hey, if you go to this drugstore, they sell an ankle brace there that's really good and you should totally try it because I've had that same sprain. And why don't we do that with mental health? Why don't we say, like, this is what I deal with. Like, what are you dealing with? Oh, well, I found this is really helpful. And sometimes what's helpful is just knowing that you're not alone. Because I went through a phase in my life where I thought suicide was just the selfish act that people chose. Like I was firmly like I had a friend whose father killed himself when my friend was a teenager, and I saw the effect it had on him, and it was a terrible thing. It was like just a bad thing. And I saw him like have to go through his sort of older teen, young adult years without a father, but also knowing that his father had sort of tapped out. And that shaped my idea of suicide being the selfish thing. Like you are selfish. You have chosen to end your life until I felt suicidal. And then I realized that people that kill themselves have just lost the battle. Like I'm sure there are people that take the coward's way out. I'm sure there are people for whom suicide is a cowardly thing. But I think for 9 out of 10 people, proper like depression is trying to kill you. Like a disease is trying to kill you, depression is trying to kill you. It's trying to tell you you're not enough. It's trying to tell you you can't beat it. It's trying to do everything in its power to get you to a point that you just end. And it's crazy that my mental health and my physical health were struggles I had at the same time because when I had COVID, that's what I felt like. I really couldn't breathe properly. I had no energy. I felt like COVID was trying to kill me. I was like, this is a virus that has got into my body and it's trying to take my air out of my lungs. It's trying to destroy me. And after I sort of got better and recovered from that, and I look back on my mental health struggles, I realized it was the same thing. Because every time you think I can beat my anxiety or I can talk to someone about it, it tells you, no, you can't. You can't talk to someone about this. You got to deal with it yourself. You got to be quiet about it until you get into a point where there's no way out. And I think until people start going, wow, this really is like a virus or a bacteria. This really is like a physical ailment. This really is something that people are not choosing it. People are not choosing to be depressed. You don't just pucker up. You don't just get over it. You don't just like, you don't just go like, oh, I feel better now. You don't just go for a walk and then suddenly you're okay. You know, you have to identify it as a health issue and then tackle it like you would any other health issue. And you have to tackle it holistically. Like you can't just go, well, I'm on pills now, so everything's fine, or well, I walk every day, so everything's fine. You have to do everything. Like I know if I don't eat right, which I don't, if I don't exercise, which I don't, and if I don't take my medication, which I do most days, and when I forget, I can tangibly feel it. If I don't do all those things, I'm going to struggle with my mental health. And it's like anything else. I mean, I it was 8 years ago actually. So 8 years ago, I was sitting in a hospital bed because I had climbed over a fence and slipped, and I'd fallen and landed perfectly on the head of my femur, which had pushed the ball into my pelvic joint and
Mm.
just shattered it, like
Mm.
absolutely shattered it. Right?
That
I
sounds
got like
like
some
it might have been
serious.
uncomfortable.
It was the worst pain I have felt in my life, and I was sat in a hospital bed, and I knew when I got out of the hospital that if I wanted to walk without a limp, because what basically happens is you're off your leg for so long with the recovery. It's not like a hip replacement. I mean, a hip replacement, when you get old and you have like like arthritis in your hips, they replace your hip. It's like 2 weeks and you can walk again. With the pelvic joint, it's so fragile and it has to heal so much. You're off your feet for like 10 to 12 weeks. And when I went for the X-ray, the bone in my right leg, which was the good leg, was like white, like solid on the X-ray, and the bone in my left leg was just faded and gray. And that was like your bone density atrophies, your muscles atrophy from not using that leg for like 10 to 12 weeks. And I had to be intentional about walking and doing things because I knew that if I didn't, I would not be able to walk without a limp. I knew that the way to get from limping to walking confidently was through walking, through doing things, and I had to do it. We don't talk about mental health in that way. We don't talk about mental health in the sense that if I don't do these things, we're very happy to talk to each other. We'll talk like that with professionals. Like you could talk to a therapist and they'll say you should do these things because they'll help your mental health. But we need to make it every day to be able to talk about our struggles and go, hey guys, like I'm dealing with this thing. Not and I think part of it is because again, we've built maybe an idea of self-sufficiency into society. It's like if I talk to you about it, like, hey man, you guys have got your own problems. I don't want to put this on you.
I don't have any problems, but go ahead.
Oh, well, that's great then. I'm happy for you. But you know what I mean? Like we want to be self-sufficient. We want to be the guy. We want to be the man. You don't want to be the guy that goes to people with your problems. And I would say like I think the only solution is for us to build better relationships. Because you can't have these conversations with people you don't have a strong relationship with, unless you're on a podcast and you can talk about anything.
Anything that YouTube allows you to. I have first of all, I have a couple questions for you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, though. If you
No
want to
problem.
finish. Yeah. So,
No, you go.
are you familiar with the book The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman?
I'm familiar with it. I've never read it. I've heard about it.
You should read it. It's a super short book. It's a very short novel, but it's written by Dan Millman, who's I think Olympic gold medalist. At bare minimum, I know he's national champion in gymnastics. He went to UCLA, and it's a semi biographical story about him. He was a gymnast, and he broke his leg in a bunch of places in a motorcycle accident, and managed to overcome that injury and go on to either the Olympics or the national championships, one of the two, and like did a bunch of stuff that was supposed to be impossible. But it goes beyond that. It also deals with it introduces a lot of the Zen Buddhist philosophy, and goes into a little bit of sort of a new age spiritualistic story in some ways, and deals with it. It fictionalizes mystical events in his life, which is it's a great book. It's very entertaining and it's very enjoyable to read, but it's got a similar message of it has a similar message of having everything taken away from you, looking into yourself and seeing what's there and saying, okay, these are the broken pieces of what I expected my life to be. Now I must sift through those shards and find the jewels among them which I will reform into something better than it was before.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, so
I'm gonna read that. That's
yeah,
great.
totally. And the audiobook's fairly decent, so whatever, but it's short, so it's worth reading. But on that to that point, my response to the subject matter in general is that in a certain way, I almost believe that we shouldn't be talking about the subject because I think that there's in a perfect world we wouldn't be, right? In a perfect
Yeah.
world, it wouldn't be a necessity to do it. So clearly we have the problems and now we do have to deal with them. We do have to talk about it. We do have to bring it out. And one of the ways that what I have found to be a necessity in life is using my power to create. For me personally, that is what has allowed me to that's what has allowed me to invite the light back into my own personal darkness, is to say there's wonderful beauty in this experience. As horrific as it is, there's beauty in this experience. I have a rare gift that I can identify that beauty. I can express that beauty. I can show that beauty to other people. I can touch them with it. I can move them. And in some small way, I've improved their life through those means. If I keep working at it, I get better at it. I do that better. I help people more. And what that is meaning. And I've had a lot of moments where I had to sit down and make the intentional decision to create meaning in my own life in order to save my life. And that perspective's my perspective. That's my story, but there's a deeper universal path that I followed to get there that everybody can apply. Everybody in the world has a life filled with meaning, but it's the call that every individual has to rise to discover that meaning, to pull it out, to render it into something, to refine it, to channel it through themselves, to translate it, and to share it with other people. And it doesn't matter what your job is, it doesn't matter what your gifts are, if you're intelligent or unintelligent or physically strong or not, that's just your mode of being. You have a gift, you have something inside of you worth sharing.
I think there's a lot of truth to it, and I think it's what you say about finding meaning and creating. I think as human beings, being creative is baked into us. It's baked into our DNA. And I think even if you're not in a creative industry, even the person with the most mundane job, if you pry enough, you will find that there is something they love that is creative. So like a good friend of mine is an accountant, and there's a million jokes about how boring accounting is. I mean, he does taxes. That's what he does. He's my tax guy, actually. He's my friend and my tax guy. He also runs my teenage son is part of his Dungeons and Dragons group, and he's a Dungeons and Dragons like dungeon master, game master, whatever. And he is a massive Dungeons and Dragons nerd, and he creates beautiful campaigns. My son loves playing over there. He loves the campaigns that he comes up with, and that is what he does. And he's also really into cooking. He takes his cooking extremely seriously. He cooks really intricate dishes, and his wife is Brazilian, and so he is very interested in different cultures and the way that they prepare food. And this is a guy that's an accountant. And if you say to someone, "I know a really creative accountant," they think you mean he's cooking the books for the mafia. Like they don't think,
Yeah, what's his
you know
number?
what I mean? Yeah, what's his number? So, and that to me is like everyone is like that in a sense. Like you'll seldom find someone that doesn't have a creative outlet of some sort. And I think when you get to people that are highly creative, because now, I mean, everyone is creative in a sense, but you have people that are highly creative. You have people that work in creative industries. I think for people like us, it's almost vital. It is vital to be creating things so much more than for anybody else because it's so baked into who we are. It's so part of, And I don't think it's about identity. I think it's just who we are. Like it has to come out. That's why I love making music, and that's why I enjoy doing like myriad different things and not just writing stories. Like I enjoy photography. Photography for me was born out of necessity. So I was traveling and I was not taking photos, and I was going, this is dumb because I'm in Germany and it's gorgeous and I don't have a camera. This is stupid. So I got a camera and I started taking photos when I traveled. And then I was like, I can take photos. And then I started figuring out how to take them properly and how to edit. And I like irritated the living shit out of anybody that I knew that was a photographer because I'd ask them a million questions. And of course, my imposter syndrome would go off the charts because here I am in my like late 30s learning photography, and you get to a shoot, you get to an event with a camera, and you're just assuming everyone's looking at me going, this guy must be, he's like older, he must be so good at what he does. And you're like, no, I just picked this camera up yesterday. Like this is, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's so hard for me. That's a whole other struggle for me. But to me, it's like, people say that we talk about legacy a lot. We talk about what do we leave behind in this world. Um, I don't know that we have to leave so much behind when we're dead. I just think that we can have a positive impact while we're alive. And I think that for creative people, the more we create and the more we just, I mean, that's what we're made to do, man. Like, I'm all about doing what you're made to do. For me, that's a faith thing. Like, I take that out of the Bible personally, but you don't have to. You can take it from anywhere, really. But, I tie it back to the story of the talents. Everyone knew that story in Sunday school. The guy gives each of them money, and the one guy buries it in the ground, and the other guy makes a little bit of money, and the other guy puts it to work. And for me, it's like I want to be the guy that puts it to work. And that's not a financial thing. That's a like I know how to make music. So if I'm not learning instruments and playing music, then I'm wasting that talent for no other reason but that's what God put me on this earth to do. Like if it's in me, then there's a reason it's in me and I should do something with it. And I think what you're saying about finding meaning in that is very, very true. Even if you don't approach it from a sort of traditional Christian perspective, just in general, finding meaning and doing what you're meant to do is huge. And I think redefining what that is. I think a lot of people, especially in the industry we're in, I mean, we're all like, we've all been doing this for a similar amount of time. And I think we have sort of similar sort of designy industry kind of backgrounds. We came up through the age of vision and aspiration. People that were building empires out of nothing, people that were teaching themselves web design and then creating, beautiful things and just creating businesses and creating an industry that didn't exist. And so we think that the meaning is in achieving. We think that the meaning is in being that guy, right? The kids of today are looking at Elon Musk's of the world and going, that's the meaning, man, is in being the guy that makes electric cars and wants to live on Mars. Please, I hope he gets that right. I just hope he's a wackadoodle. Anyway, so Elon Musk is going to cancel me. He's going to cancel my non-existent Twitter account after this. But anyway,
Elon, I just want to say personally, if there's you got any jobs or anything, we're not associated with Wes in any way, and that we will absolutely be reporting him to any necessary
Yep.
any necessary ex authorities to cancel him shortly after the podcast. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So like you don't have to be that guy. You don't have to build the empire. You just have to put what's inside you out. You just have to take what you have and just churn it out.
You have to be on the journey.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I knew a guy who was a sort of salt of the earth kind of guy, would give you the shirt off his back, not super educated, and he would work any sort of construction jobs. He was a great painter, construction guy, paving guy, handyman jobs, general renovations, whatever you need. And whenever the construction work would dry up, whenever he didn't have income, he would get up at 4 in the morning. And in South Africa, we have this amazing traditional dessert called a koeksister. It's an Afrikaans word. And what it is it's a little dough, almost like a little dough spiral, like it's twisted like this. And it's dough and it's like soaked in syrup. And it's a big thing in South Africa. It's like a very traditional thing, and everyone loves it. And everyone will brag that my grand makes better koeksisters than your grand, or like you need to buy it at that store because there's a better. He would get up at 4 o'clock, bake koeksisters, and go door to door and sell them because in his mind, his meaning was in providing for his family. He didn't have to be anything spectacular. He didn't have to be like, he didn't do the renovations and go, one day I'm going to create my own construction company and I'm going to become a construction tycoon. All he wanted to do was be a good person to the people around him and provide for his family. And if there was no construction work, he would do anything he needed to. He even delivered newspapers at one stage in his life as an adult. Like I delivered newspapers as a kid on my bicycle. This is not something adults do. I'm like, you do this when you're a kid. And he's like, it's money, like it's an income. And I'm not working right now. And I have so much respect for him. And that to me has also been a thing of going, we have such big aspirations, but at the end of the day, whatever you feel is put inside you to do, whatever you know is burning inside you, like just let that out. Start there. If you make a massive success of it, that's great. If you just provide for your family, that's great as well. You just have to be content with life. Like the biggest struggle is people lack contentment. They lack the ability to go, this is enough for me because I know that I'm doing what I need to do. That should be this measure of success. The measure of success should be, have I got something burning inside of me? Have I taken that thing and produced something with it? If I haven't, then I'm failing. If I have, I'm succeeding. And if I make money off it, great. As long as I can eat, as long as I can feed my family, it's great. I don't have to. We need to stop wanting to be the billionaires. The irony is everybody wants to be the thing that they hate. Like you got people coming up and they want to be massive, they want to be rich, and then at the same breath they're going, isn't it insane how rich Elon Musk is? Isn't it insane how rich Jeff Bezos is? They should tax the rich. I'm like, you just said you wanted to be rich. Like you just said you want to be that successful, but you want to kill those dudes because they're too rich and it's obscene. Like, so where are you drawing the line? Because to a guy living in squalor. I mean, I'm in South Africa. We have the biggest, like one of the biggest wage gaps, inequality gaps in the world. To the guy living in a township, living in a shanty town, you're obscenely rich. So when is it enough? Like, how is that your measure of success? Just
We,
find out what it is that you were put on this earth to do and do it.
previously, we've spoken with Winston Ye, whom you might be
Oh,
familiar with.
Winston's such a, I love Winston. He's such a
Yeah,
he's a
I
good
mean,
friend.
he's a genius. He's
Oh yeah.
unbelievable intellect, and his perspective and passion is it's really unique to him.
Yeah.
He talked about when he was going through the lockdowns and unable to travel, and his livelihood was affected. He talked about starting his show, his bike show in Taiwan, and a Taiwanese bike show. And um, that was, to me, that was really, really significant that that was his response to that event in his life, because it's evidence of the fact that creating meaning is unique to the individual. The meaning of
Yeah.
your life and the meaning of my life are no matter how similar they may be, depending on what field you're in or what your home life is like, they're totally, totally different. It's you and I have an individual living experience, and they're 100% different perspectives. And
Absolutely.
for him, the meaning I drew from his story was that he went through this experience. He was already in a situation where bike culture was because Taiwanese culture to a certain extent is a little bit more of a conformist culture. There's a little bit of a split between the typical bike culture, which is highly individualistic, and so there was already a certain stigma associated with the culture where he lives, and so he was fighting that to begin with. But then when the lockdowns came, that's all he had. Like he had was what was at home, and that's pretty much it. And which is complicated by the fact that it's difficult to ship motorcycles away from Taiwan to other places that he's built, etc. But he, what he did was he took that and he internalized it. He said, here's what I've got. Here's what this difficult situation has delivered into my life. What can I make out of that? And he made Taiwanese centric bike show. And it came to be a pivotal moment in his life, and it changed his life, and it changed his perspective on life. That's how he found meaning in something that was very difficult. And that is present for every single person on earth. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the tangible material things that are in your life. They all of those are tools, all of those are avenues and opportunities. It's inside of you. It's a decision. It's a decision to create. It's a decision to build. It's a decision to take things and change them in such a way that they are better now than they were before. And I don't care how fucked up everything is, you can do it. You've got the
Yeah,
things in front of you that you can work with.
yeah. And what I love about Winston's sort of mentality with the show that he organized, is that when he's doing that, he's building away from himself. He's looking at the greater Taiwanese custom motorcycle scene, and he's saying, I can put something out there that's going to benefit others. And if only we all had that mentality day to day of in what we're doing. Like if only that's how we thought. Because we don't. Like there's two things I think we miss sometimes as just as a human race. Generally speaking, I mean, a lot of people get this right, but I think by and large, a lot of us get it wrong. The one is building away from yourself. The other one is building for the future. A friend said to me once, like the old proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 40 years ago, and the second best time is now, you know? And that's what Winston did when he sat down and said, well, I can't do these things, so I'm going to start planning the show. It's not going to give him gratification tomorrow. It's not going to pay off immediately. He's got to plan it ahead. And then he's going to do it, and it's going to be as successful as it's going to be. But he's going to have to do another one and another one before it really grows into something that will start to steamroll. So he's starting to build for a future, and he's starting to build for a future that he's not going to see. There's a wonderful musical artist called John Mark McMillan that I love listening to, and he's quite a storyteller by nature. And he tells the story of going to one of the national parks in the States and seeing these massive sequoia trees, and just wanting to like plant one, but realizing that if he was to plant one, like he would never see it in all of its glory. Like his great grandkids would. Like it's the next generation, the next. And if we had that mentality with the things we did, like Winston of saying, like, because I mean, that show's not for him. That show is not going to make him rich. It's going to build the Taiwanese motorcycle culture. It's going to give the other custom builders and being on like writing for Bike EXIF, I've seen his impact on the Taiwanese custom bike scene. I remember the days of his shop, Rough Crafts, being all that was coming out of Taiwan. And I've seen guys that have literally worked on the fabrication of his bikes, then go off and start their own custom shops. And now, like, there's more and more Taiwanese custom builders coming up, and he's laid down the groundwork. And now, by organizing the show, he's saying, guys, I want to put us on the map. I want to showcase what we're doing, and I want to create opportunities because when I started out, I might not have had the same opportunities. If we all did that, if we all built away from ourselves, and if we all built for something that we know we're not going to see the fruit of, like the world would be a very different place. It would be a totally different place. And I think if step one is finding what's inside you and putting it out there and finding meaning in that, maybe step two is then saying, how can I do that so that it benefits others? How can I take what I have, put it out there, not so that I feel better, but then actually snowball it? And I don't know what that looks like. I mean, that's challenging on many levels. I mean, I examine my life somewhere and I go like, am I doing enough to impact the world around me positively? Like there's things that are easy. You can look at them and go, oh, yeah, I'm making a difference there. And there's things that you go, is this just a selfish thing? I think living for others is a higher calling. I think living for others is it's just I think there's beauty in it. I think there's a real blessing in it. There's a real peace in it. Um, I believe you have to balance that with taking care of yourself, obviously. But I think when you put all those pieces together, those puzzle pieces of like, let's take care of ourselves, like our mental health, let's take care of each other's mental health, and then let's take what's inside us and put it out there, and then let's like, I mean, I'm lucky. I get to write stories about motorcycles. It's a total bullshit job. It's fucking useless. Like there's no,
Right,
I'm not
writing
doing.
writing motivational swear word memes is also a bullshit job.
Yeah, but
So
you know what I
Brian
mean?
Brian does real work for GFDA.
Yeah,
He makes the business run. He's why we have electricity. But so I can
yeah.
relate to you a little bit on the bullshit job.
Yeah. But hey, people find meaning in it. People find enjoyment in it. And so we're creating something that people can enjoy, and it's like sometimes you got to pinch yourself and go, I've managed to turn bullshit into income. Like I've managed to like actually do something with this, and it has some sort of impact on people. And it's crazy because I get emails from people saying, I've built this custom bike, but I built it because we saw all these bikes on your website and we said, hey, we can do this, and so great. I've given someone, or like I say, because it's not just me, we've given someone an excuse to do something cool with their hands and with their creativity. But it's, I think it's, I think for me, one thing I really struggle with is the idea of mentorship, because finding mentorship in business, if you're in the right group of people, is easy, because you're in a business environment. There's someone that's more experienced than you. And if they are a good person, if they are a good mentor, you can fall into the mentorship thing and you can be a mentee very seamlessly. And I've had a couple of mentors in my life in business and or in my, I don't want to say in business, I hate that phrase, but in the things I've done in my creative pursuits, I've had some mentors that I just fell into those relationships and they're great mentors. I have no idea how to mentor someone. I have no idea how to be on the other side of that and intentionally go, man, this guy needs guidance. And I've been doing this for however long, whatever it is, whether it's music, whether it's editorial, whether it's whatever it is. Like, I think there needs to be an intentionality sometimes of going, you know, because I can't remember who the guy was quoting. He was a friend of mine was quoting a book that he'd read, or a motivational speaker or something. And I don't usually go for. It's the other thing I like. The other reason I love GFDA is because I hate motivational accounts.
So do
Like
I.
there's two motivational accounts I follow on Instagram. One is GFDA and the other one's disappointing affirmations. Because disappointing affirmations is hilarious. It's like my favorite one is like, no one is coming to save you. You are the adult. I'm so sorry. That's like that one's just stuck with me. It's like, you know, but I hate motivational stuff. I hate motivational speaking, and I think there's a place for it. Sure, like there's people that can there's people that can coach you, and there's people that can. But I think this guy was quoting a motivational speaker, so immediately I switched off. But then what he said made a lot of sense, and he said this guy had said, make sure in business, in your career, in your life, that you have a mentor, that you have a mentee, and that you have someone that's on your level. Make sure you have those three things at all times. So you're getting knowledge imparted to you from someone, you're getting that experience that rubs off, you're learning from someone, you're humble enough to go, you know more than me, I want to learn. You've got someone on your level that you can not compete with, but you can have that sort of we're in this together kind of thing, and have someone that you're giving the knowledge to. Because I think that there's something missing if we're not helping the next generation or the next sort of wave of people come through. It's that thing of building away from ourselves. And that's what I struggle with. I struggle with like, how do I create, especially when you do what I do, which is like sitting behind a desk. I mean, what I do is not glamorous. Everyone like, oh, you're the editor of Bike Except that's so fucking cool. I'm like, I know. Have you met my MacBook? It's my entire life. My whole office is this tiny little midnight MacBook Air. That's it, and whatever else I can plug into it. Yeah, that's me, until I get on a plane again and go somewhere. That's what it is. It's me sitting here emailing people, sitting on social media, writing stories. It's not glamorous, but it's fun and I love doing it.
What you're describing is sacrifice. That's kind of been the
Absolutely.
theme of this part of the conversation. And sacrifice is a necessity for creating meaning. It's one of the critical ingredients of creating meaning. You
Agreed.
must pay a price, or what you'll get in return has no value. And
Absolutely. I agree with that completely.
so for creatives, a lot of the time, which there's a line between, artist, commercial artist, designer, right? Like the lines are very blurred once it's your 9 to 5 job to be a creative person. In fact, most of the time you're not being a creative person when you're paid to be a creative person. But people who have the innate drive to create and who have refined their skills that allow them to create, that sacrifice a lot of the times is a very personal sacrifice. It is you're going to go through something painful. You're going to um, witness you're going to witness struggles in other people's lives. You're gonna have to take something that's very unpleasant, take it inside of you, and make it into something hopefully that's beautiful or valuable or worthy of appreciation. That's a straightforward process for somebody who is an artist. It's not such a straightforward process for a common person. And one of the ways, for example, You talked about your friend who had to feed his family. So he's if you're a father, I am not a father, so I'm speaking above my pay grade at the moment, but I believe one of the important parts of fatherhood is accepting a lot of sacrifices. I mean, your dad made the sacrifice of something he loved doing because he had a greater responsibility to know he was going to be able to do his absolute best for his kids. That required him to have two
Yep.
functional legs and two arms, right? And
Yep.
so when if every for people who are listening to this and who may be able to identify with the subject of struggling, you need to understand that that struggle is necessary. People don't want to hear that. People get really pissed off when you say that because, oh, it's terrible and I'm in pain. I don't want to hear that I'm supposed to be struggling. And I understand that. I really do. But the truth remains that it's a necessity because all living things struggle, all living things suffer. It's going to be a part of your life, and you can't turn away from it. You can't hide from it. You can't defer the blame to someone else. You can't defer the blame to other segments of society. You can't say it's the bad people over there doing the bad things that have caused my suffering. You can't blame a higher power. You can't blame anybody. You have to look inside of yourself and say, I have a certain responsibility for the events of my life. I've contributed to them. I have contributed my small part to how fucked up everything is, no matter how bad things are fucked up. And that's the first step of sacrificing. Because the moment you do that, you are able to say, okay, so if I made that contribution, or if I have a certain responsibility for myself, my well-being, improving my life, then I'm probably going to have to give something up in order to make things better. I'm probably going to have to change in some way to make things better. And again, that the direction that that takes a person is a much winding and divided path, and everybody's got to navigate it themselves. But that is a critical first step, is that awareness and acceptance of that responsibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think fatherhood is a great example. So fatherhood, parenthood in general will change you. Like it will. The first thing that happens is, and I remember this clearly when my son was, I have three kids. So when my eldest was born, um, I immediately loved him. Like my wife and I have to work at loving each other sometimes. Like if you fall in love with someone, you decide to get married, and then there's times when you wake up and you're like, I don't like you very much today. I'm going to choose to love you. You know, I had no choice. I loved my son the second he came into this world. It was just, I just burst out in tears. I just remember, like, it was just, I just would have given everything for him. Um, and then the reality of actually having kids and actually living through that sets in. And sometimes it's sacrifice, and sometimes you realize that you're being an asshole and you're not sacrificing, and you should, and you have to step up, and that's tough. That's tough to be self-aware and to go, I'm really being a bad father or a bad husband. Like I've there's been phases of my marriage where I can look back and go, I was a really shitty husband. And I took me a long time to get to a point of going, you need to man up and not do these things, not act this way. You need to be a better husband and you need to be a better father. But the other thing about sacrifice and suffering is that, like, bringing it down to parenthood specifically, and obviously this is not everybody's lived experience because not everyone's a parent, and I get that, and this is not going to be the same for everyone. But whether it's my mental health, whether it's my work ethic, whether it's my career, my kids are watching. And if I can take the struggles of life with grace and stand up and go, I'm going to take responsibility for what I've done and what's happened to me without moaning about it and being like, oh, life sucks. Life sucks for everyone. Life is tough. It's tough. You're going to have struggles. You're going to have struggles because we're humans. We're faulty. It's just the way it is. The world economy is faulty because it's built on human beings. Our bodies are faulty because they are. We're susceptible to disease, to cancer, to like, I mean, it's just, that's just how we are. That's how nature is. You've got animals that live in certain habitats and that have certain weaknesses and strengths, and we're the same. We have weaknesses and strengths. If a bus hits me tomorrow, I'm going to be in a lot of pain because we are not built to be hit by buses. And it's the same with anything else in life. We are not perfect, rock solid, unbreakable beings. We're going to hurt. But I think for me, when we have struggles, the challenge is to lean into it with grace. And I don't get that right. Like I fuck that up all the time. Like I get into struggles and I'm like, oh, I'm so angry because this is all happening. And it's like, but you will struggle and struggling makes you stronger. Like that is how we learn. I firmly believe that is how we improve ourselves is by making the sacrifices and by having the difficult times. I remember when I was in hospital with the pelvic break, every single day. I mean, first of all, when that happens to you, your dignity goes out the window because you can do nothing. So nurses are washing you. You have a catheter in. If you, I remember after the operation, this was the best part. After the operation, my whole digestive system just shut down from all the drugs, all the narcosis and everything to knock me out. And after like 3 days, the nurse was like, "When last did you take a shit?" And I'm like, "I haven't got out of this bed, so never." And she's like, "You got to take a shit." I'm like, "How do you figure this is going to work?" She looked at me deadpan. She didn't even flinch. She said, "I'm going to stick a suppository up your ass. Call me when you feel something. I'll bring a bedpan." And I was like, really?" She's like, "That's what's going to happen." And I'm like, "And afterwards?" She's like, "Then I clean you up." I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like, the most embarrassing, vulnerable thing you can imagine. And I had to do that like 2 or 3 times because I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't move. And one thing I learned in that is that you can't fight that. That's going to happen. There's nothing I can do that says you're not going to do it this way. Like I'm not going to shit in a bedpan. You're not going to clean me. No, that is exactly what's going to happen. You have no choice. So you can kick against it, or you can just like put your trust in the staff and go like, they do this every day. This is not embarrassing for them. It's embarrassing for you. This is what they do. And you can allow yourself, and then it breaks down. It gets chipped away. It gets chipped away. And when you get up the other side of it, you go, okay, that was a terrible experience, but a piece of me that was stubborn, a piece of me that was self-sufficient, a piece of me that was maybe not like humble enough, it's gone now. It's been chipped away. Like it's diamond in the rough stuff. Every cliche you've heard about, like I love the like a diamond is just a piece of coal that performed well under pressure. Like that, that is motivational bullshit. But it's all bullshit, but it's all true. Like that is how we get refined. Um, and one of the things that was tough in hospital was not being able to like being in pain when they had to clean me because they had to wash my back to make sure I didn't get bed sores, and they would have to roll me on the side to do that, and it was so painful that they would have to come 10 minutes beforehand and give me a morphine injection.
Mm.
That's how bad it was, just to move me a little bit. And every night that they rolled me over, I was like screaming in pain, and every night the nurse said to me, "Don't fight it, don't fight it, don't fight it." And the last night that they did it, like the last night in hospital, she said to me, "Stop fighting it." And I just went, "Okay, this is going to hurt. And I can't not make it hurt. Screaming is not going to make it less painful." And it was the least painful of all of the evenings I'd had because I just took a deep breath and I went, "Let's get it over with." And finally, it wasn't a struggle. It wasn't as painful. In my mind, it just accepted that this was a pain I had to get through. Um, I was riding on my motorcycle once and I had to get somewhere. It was freezing cold. It was raining. It rained right through my rain gear. And I was tense. My whole body was tense because I was panicking. I was like, when am I going to, I'm on the highway. I can't just pull over and wait under a tree until the rain stops. And the point that it became easier to ride was the point where my brain went, "You're going to get cold. Lean into it because you can't stop it." And I just went, "Okay, well, I'm soaked through. I'm freezing cold." And I just went, and I just said, "Well, it is what it is now, you know, and I got to get through it." And that's kind of how struggles are in life. You're going to get into a situation and you can get hung up on the why is this happening to me? Like I don't know what I'm going to do. Or you can just exhale and go, "This is going to hurt. This is going to suck. This is going to be awkward. This is going to be embarrassing, but it's chipping away. It's life chipping away at me. It's going to take away the bad parts of me. And I could just need to exhale and get to the other side of it." And when you get to the other side of it, you can look back and go, "Holy fuck, I actually learned something. I'm a better person now." And the next time that struggle comes, you can take it on with more grace, with more strength. I mean, that's where the strength comes from. And as a parent, like I want to model that for my kids. I almost want to get that right, not so that the struggles are easier for me to deal with, but so when my kids have kids of their own or go into the workforce or go out there, I mean, we learn through doing. I remember my mom saying to me once, what are you doing this weekend? I said, oh, I got to catch up on some work. Now, I'm not an advocate of, I mean, I don't believe in this sort of we should work 24/7. I think it's a bad culture that's crept in. But sometimes you got to knuckle down and you got to get the job done. And I told her once, like, I got to work this weekend. And she said, you're always working so hard. Like, why are you always working so hard? I said, are you kidding me? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you asked me why I'm working hard. She's like, yeah, why do you work so hard? I said, okay, I remember when I was like 7 years old or 11 years old or whatever. I remember dad being on the mine. You woke us up at 2 o'clock in the morning because he was coming home to grab a sandwich and you wanted us to see our father before he went back to the mine because they had an emergency that weekend. And that happened more than once. Now you're asking me why I'm working hard. Because I worked for a man that had an impeccable, I'm sorry, I was raised by a man that had an impeccable work ethic. Like my dad has got one of the strongest work ethics I've ever seen. Like he goes into, after he retired, he went into consulting for another mining project management company. And his work ethic was so strong that they put him on the board of directors, hired him from a consultant, and put him back in the workforce. He was supposed to be retired, made him financial director. And when he eventually said, guys, I need to retire, they're like, fine, but please stay on the board and please keep consulting for us. So that's the work ethic that I saw when I grew up. My dad never once said to me, you should always work hard at what you do. He didn't have to, he just did it. And I think that these things of like allowing our creativity out, everything we've spoken about, like allowing our creativity to be out there, being able to be open about our mental health and our struggles and stuff and support each other, and then getting through these struggles. If we can do those things with grace, like our kids are going to see that. And if you don't have kids, then it's the people around you. It's the next generation. It's the younger people, the older people. It's the guys coming into your industry. I mean, that's all we're trying to put out in the world is like, if we want what we do to influence others, then we need to do it in such a way that we're doing it with grace, we're doing it with strength and confidence and humility and being willing to let the waves bash us so that we can be better because we know that the waves are going to bash us anyway. And if we fight it, we're just pissing into the wind.
The suffering that comes from accepting responsibilities is less than the suffering that comes from the consequences of avoiding your responsibilities. And
Yep.
that's been true. Going back to your suppository story, which is a sentence very few people get to hear in life. If you hadn't
Dude,
taken,
what's sorry, what I mean, a podcast isn't a podcast without at least one good suppository story.
right, that gets referenced multiple times. Um,
Yeah, totally.
so if you hadn't taken the suppository, you would have had a bowel rupture, and
Yeah,
that's worse than having a stranger stick the
wipe
finger
your
up your
ass.
butt. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's your father's work ethic is I'm sure he was not excited about going and doing his job at 2 o'clock in the morning, but
Yeah.
the consequences of avoiding that was a far expanded suffering of his family, et cetera. And that's part of that personal responsibility that we all have to take for ourselves, community, and your whole society. You are responsible for your society for one small part of it, and
Absolutely.
that responsibility is another place that we find meaning in life. It is the acceptance of that responsibility because it gives your actions consequence, and
Yeah.
it says I do have a place and I have to fulfill that place.
Yeah.
Well, Wes, what do you consider to be your greatest success in life?
Whoa. um, I think that my marriage is still intact and that I have kids and that I have a family. Um, I think my kids are turning out pretty great. Like I love my kids. We have our fights and our struggles. And I mean, you're dealing with a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old that's 12 going on 17, and a 7-year-old that's about to turn 8 and is a little bit younger than his siblings and was sort of an unplanned kid. So he's got a bit of third child syndrome. And it's a tightrope. But I think, and it's not bragging, but I think to have been married for 22 years, um, in a society that puts so little currency value on marriage these days. I've seen many friends get divorced. I've seen friends get divorced for good reasons, and I've seen marriages fall apart for bad reasons. And to be 22 years down the line and be in the place we're at in our marriage, I think that for me is success because I had to change things about myself that weren't good for us to get this far. And that's one thing I had to do. The other thing is I had to put my faith and trust into God and just go, I can't do this by myself. I need a higher power to help me. I am not enough. And I had to put my faith in my wife and go, she's put up with a lot of my bullshit. And she's had the balls to stand up and go, you need to change this about yourself because this is not a healthy thing. And you don't get that far down the road without working on yourself. And I think if we can keep working on it, I don't consider my career to be successful because it can be gone tomorrow. Like the motorcycle industry is so volatile, the economy is so volatile, none of our jobs are safe. That's the reality of it, actually. You can have it all taken away tomorrow. It can all fall apart tomorrow, and you'll have to figure out something else. You'll have to bake cook sisters or do renovations. You'll have to do something else. And I don't consider that to be successful. Musically, I'm not super, I don't consider that to be successful. I make music with my friends. I think what's great about us being in a band together is that I know the other two maybe take it more seriously than I do. I take it seriously, but I don't need it to be anything. I'm happy to just write songs. We just released a track on Valentine's Day today that is all about a guy getting out of a narcissistic relationship that he's been gaslit into believing was all his fault. And we thought it'd be fucking hilarious to release it on Valentine's Day. Um, but we can put music out there that we're proud of, and it's just for the sake of getting that creativity out. I don't have to make it. It doesn't have to be financially viable because I have a job. I have something to do. So I don't ever want my career to be something that I see as success because it is so fleeting. But if I can keep my family together, if I can provide for my family, if my wife and I can continue to grow our marriage and continue to love each other and continue to raise our kids, and if my kids can go out into the world and go take what we've modeled for them and make successes out of their lives in the same way and impact the people around them. That's all I want to do. I just want to die one day and people say, he was a good husband, he was a good father, and he was a good friend to the people around him. That's all I want. I don't need any of the other stuff. And I don't say that frivolously. I don't say that to look good. Like it took me a long time to get to that place because I wanted the other stuff. And one of the difficult things about being 45 and still learning new things is that you constantly deal with imposter syndrome. It's like, um, I mean, like playing bass. Like I started playing bass 2 years ago. My wife and I used to be in a band together, and she always played bass, and so I'd always wanted to play the bass guitar because she like rocked out playing the bass guitar, and I'd always wanted to do it. And I finally did it 2 years ago. But you know how funny it is being like the 45-year-old dude that goes into a music store with I've only been doing this for 2 years enthusiasm. And the other guy's looking at the bass guitars like 16, 17 years old, and you're this old guy. So I've realized that I'm not going to have success in many things because I'm probably going to change my mind 100 times again. I might have a totally different career 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm 60, 70. I don't know if I can still be relevant in the space I'm in now. So I'm, for the sake of self-preservation, learning to find success in the things that are tangible and permanent. And for me personally, that's faith, family, like kids, wife, people around me, my friends, my community. I want that to be where my success lies.
I think that your definition of success is it's a menagerie of overcoming small challenges in life. And those many, many small challenges come together to form the great struggle of life that all human beings have to deal with. And that is the great meaning of our lives is that it is difficult and it's the life you got. And in spite of that difficulty, you have to make something of it. And there are going to be uncountable aspects that are unfair and that you will not get a lot of benefit out of directly, but you're going to have to do it anyway because it's your life. So embrace it, embrace that struggle and find the meaning in it for yourself. Create the meaning in it for yourself. Wes, we're so grateful to you for the time that you've given us today, and I know that a lot of people are going to be appreciative of your willingness to discuss difficult personal subjects, and that's going to give them a little peace of mind that it's okay for them to think about and talk about those things. So, thank you on behalf of those members of our audience. We would like to give you an opportunity to tell everybody in the world where they can find you on social media or, your publication or anywhere that you'd like to direct them. Would you share that stuff with us real quick? And of course, we'll annotate all this in the usual places.
Sure, no problem. So don't find me on social media. I don't want any more followers. I'm just kidding. Um, you can give me Instagram fame at by Wes Reyneke. So that's Wesreyneke. It's a German surname, in case you're wondering, although I'm not German. And you can find my writing at bikeexif.com, BIKEEXIF. And if anyone is wondering what that means, photographers will know that EXIF data is the digital data that's stored on a digital photograph, the sort of aperture and the shutter speed and all that stuff. And Bike EXIF was originally founded by Chris Hunter as a website for beautiful photos of beautiful motorcycles. So that's why it's bikeexif.com. Yeah, so that's where I'm at mostly. I mean, I don't really have much of an online presence beyond that. If you want to listen to my music, look for Thieves and Foxes on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. We just released a song for the ex-lovers, we call it, on Valentine's Day. So, and thank you guys for making time for me on Valentine's Day. So, as you can tell, like one of the keys to being married for 22 years is not giving a shit about dumb shit like Valentine's Day. So that's why so like some of my friends are like, "Did you book your podcast interview on Valentine's Day?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Didn't you have plans?" I'm like, "No." Like,
Well, Brian is in just a couple of weeks, Brian is going to begin being married for 22 years and
oh, congratulations,
presumably
man.
23 and 24 years.
10, 11 days from now, actually.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
congratulations.
that's good advice for Brian. Brian, ignore
Yeah.
Valentine's Day. You'll be happily married for the rest of your life.
Oh, if you're married to, or only if you're married to a woman who also doesn't care about Valentine's Day. If she's big
Mm,
on Valentine's Day, do not ignore Valentine's Day.
those are important
Yeah.
instructions. Those are the instructions on the back of the piece of paper
My
that a lot of people forget to turn over and read.
my dad fucked up his anniversary once. Once. Then he went to the local florist. This was back in the day where you just had to write down credit card details. You didn't have like tap machines and stuff. Wrote down his credit card details and told the florist, put this in your diary from now into perpetuity and bill me each year. And every year that they lived in that town, my mom got flowers on her anniversary like clockwork.
Very, very wise man. Also good advice. Easier to do that now than it ever has been in history to have
Oh, absolutely. Oh,
recurring
yeah.
flower subscriptions.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Thank you again, Wes, for your time and for your insight and for your courage in talking about all the stuff you did. And thank you everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take it easy.
This episode of You Are Not Enough, the GFDA podcast, is brought to you by Do the Work, Lowbrow Advice for High-Level Creativity, the GFDA book. In spite of our oppressive marketing regime, many people still don't know that we wrote a book. We did. It's part the story of how GFDA went from a startup in a basement to C-list internet stardom. And it's part a visual experimentation of the GFDA advice that you're used to. But it's all totally original content. It's not the same stuff that we put on social media. And we sell signed copies of it on our website. So go to gfda.co/book or click the link below and buy one for yourself, buy 3 for yourself, and 5 for your family members. Thank you.